Okay, we're all recorded. So, hello everybody. Apologize again for all the technical issues. I'm a physician. I'm not so good with communication and Zoom webinars and stuff. So I apologize yet again. But at the end, we're only starting 10 minutes, and this Zoom is going to be recorded, so it's all good, and other people will watch it. So
Yeah, can you make me a co-host before you start? Because I lost it when I left.
Absolutely. Were you able, Karen, to bring more people?
Yeah, I was able to post a link. There were about 9 people in there, and I saw that you ended it. So yeah, hopefully they were able to click on the link and come over.
Yeah, okay. So everybody, it's nice to meet you all. My name is Yair. My co-host for today is Karen. We're both Israeli Americans that live in the area of Lower Merion. And welcome to the weekly webinar meetings that we have here in the area of Philadelphia that is open basically to people, whoever want to join from the world. Before we start with this webinar, I'll just tell you that next Sunday, we have a special guest coming from Israel. His name is Yizhar Shai. He used to be an MK and the Minister of Science and Innovation. And he unfortunately is in the news recently because his son was an elite combat unit soldier and who died on October 7th, protecting one of the villages close to Gaza. And it's a horrible tragedy for him and for his family, obviously. But he's trying, he's an innovation guy, very famous in the startup scene, and he's created a new organization called Next October, that for every person that was killed out of the 1,400 people, there will be a startup in commemorating their name. So out of his organizations, 1,400 new startups will be initiating, and I think it's a beautiful initiative. So okay, with this, I think we're going to get into the Zoom of today. And we all know that since the war has started, for various reasons, we see much more anti-Semitism from the right and the left, and nobody ever remembers, including my 101 years old grandfather from Ohio, remembers any surge of anti-Semitism like this. One of the biggest locations or arenas for anti-Semitism has been on the campuses. And because of this, we think that it's very important to talk and hear what the students and the faculty members have to say. So I won't do long introductions, but I'll just tell you that I'm hoping that Andrew Gorski, who's the ADL Philadelphia director, is going to be able to join because he was very excited about this. And I will introduce very briefly the 5 panel members, and then we'll get going right away. So because of my delay. So Michelle Waxman, maybe you can wave. She's a senior student at Bryn Mawr College. That Bryn Mawr College unfortunately got a lot of attention because of multiple anti-Semitic events in the course of the last few months. She is majoring in political science and history. She's super involved in the Jewish community, Jewish life, building efforts, president of both Hillel and Chabad in Bryn Mawr. She's an undergraduate rep to the Greater Philadelphia Hillel Board. So, her leadership has been unbelievable, and we're honored to have her here. Noah is our second student. He's a junior from UPenn at the Wharton School dual degree, and he kind of became very famous. Not only is the co-president of the Penn Israel Public Affairs and advisor to the Penn president on anti-Semitism, but he's been very involved in all what you hear about anti-Semitism, teachers, lectures, etc. And he's been part of the lawsuit against Penn, and maybe he's going to, tell us a little bit about his experience in the, with this, and also in the Congress, which he spoke. We're really lucky to have Dr. Sigal Ben Porath. She's a world-renowned professor at Penn. She focuses on democratic theory and practice, and really her focus is on free speech, which is so relevant to this whole issue of anti-Semitism, and she's multiple committees related to anti-Semitism. So we're really honored to have her, and that's what really caught the attention of the ADL regional director to jump on this call as well. We're also lucky to have Dr. Barak Mendelssohn, who is, an expert in security studies and terrorism, examination of radical Islamist groups. And he works at Haverford College, and he's a famous author on multiple influential books in this issue. But I think that he unfortunately became kind of famous in the last few months because of the anti-Semitism. Much of it has been directly directed at him. So we'll hear him speak as well. And the last one is a friend of mine, Dudi Dillenberger. Dr. Dillenberger is a leading professor of economics at the UPenn as well. and he is, world renowned in his field. But the reason that he's here is because he's been doing so much quiet work behind the scenes in order to fight the anti-Semitism in this campus and in multiple other campuses and universities across the nation. So with that, sorry again for the delay, and we will jump right into this. And I wanted to start, again, Karen is my co-host, and she'll help us with accumulating all these questions and discussion. But I wanted to start, this is going to be a really informal conversation and spontaneous, and we didn't really prepare anything because we wanted to be, from the heart of the people. So I wanted to start asking Michelle, perhaps, as our first person. You are a student, you're a senior student, you've been, participating in so many Jewish organizations. Tell us about some of your personal experiences to start the conversation.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, there are too many to count. I was making actually a list this morning with the help, I'm on spring break. So I was sitting at breakfast with my parents, like, what are all the things that have happened to me? And you can't even write a list. Like, it's been absolutely absurd. But I know one of the hardest things for me as someone who's obviously like grown up Jewish, and I went to Jewish day school growing up, grew up to be like really Zionist and believe in Israel. And some of my closest friends are currently serving in combat, and I'm surrounded by people every day who say some of the craziest things I've ever heard. So I have a coworker who's also a student. I have a campus job, and she posted actual like Nazi propaganda. She took pictures of every Jewish executive at major like news firms, like CNN, New York Times, all those places, and was made like faces, put like Jewish stars over all their faces, and were like, this is why the media is biased towards Palestine, which is kind of interesting. I think you speak to other people and people think the New York Times isn't particularly good for the Jews, but that doesn't matter, right? We see just this like complete anti-Semitism, right? Just blaming the Jews for controlling the media. I had someone in my class say that financial Zionism is the downfall of democracy and democratic backsliding and why our academic institutions are failing, essentially because the Jews are motivated by our money to take over the world, right? And so we just see all these, it's just very clear anti-Semitic tropes that they try to pretend as activism. Our board of trustees had a meeting recently, like beginning of February on campus, and people wanted them to oppose Israel and call to divest from our endowment, whatever it is. I couldn't get to class. I had my thesis meeting. I couldn't get to my thesis advisor because they were protesting so loudly and like yelling about genocide and all these things, and like completely like impacting my ability to go to class. And I would wish that was the first time, but it wasn't. They had a big protest in November, which happened across the country, right? It was like a national day of action or something. And in addition to literally vandalizing the historic buildings at Bryn Mawr with bloody handprints writing things like blood is on Jews' hands and great things like that, they were chanting so loudly with things like globalize the Intifada that I was in the building they were protesting outside of with a professor talking about my final, and she stopped our conversation to ask me if I felt safe, because she's like, this feels really intense, and she like knows I'm Jewish, she knows I'm involved in Jewish groups, and was like, I don't think you feel safe right now, you look really anxious. And I was like, you were correct, I don't feel safe, right? So it's like this constant, I was exactly answering your question, right? But it's a constant culture of intimidation that wants to make Jewish students and Zionist students specifically, or even just students who don't want outwardly like have an opinion, feel terrible and feel like they don't belong at a place like Bryn Mawr. And I think something that's pretty familiar, I mean, I think it's probably easier to understand is a place like Bryn Mawr is very liberal. It's one of the reasons so many of us go, right? Like, but we know how that horseshoe effect works, and it comes back to hurt, the anti-Semitism from the left really comes back to harm Jews. And that's really what we've been seeing since October 7th. It's not like Bryn Mawr was free of anti-Semitism before. I could have been on this panel before, honestly, talking about pre-October 7th anti-Semitism, but really since it's gotten so much worse. And I know there's a few students on here who I know I'm really excited to see, like I'm listening today, but like I've gotten to know some of them because of this anti-Semitism, because all of a sudden we have no other friends, because the clubs we were a part of and everything we were doing they totally turned on us. And they essentially said to us, unless you like refute your Judaism or whatever happened at the Oscars, or unless you say, I don't believe in Zionism, they will no longer speak to you. So now I have some really great friends, but it's a really disappointing way that it's come about.
Thank you for starting this conversation. I want to jump to our other student leader, and Noah. You've been doing a lot of stuff at Penn, and I'd like to hear maybe a couple of experiences from you or your friends of what is happening and what motivated you to be so vocal and jumping to the leadership and speaking with provosts and, participating in this lawsuit, even going to the Congress. So let's hear a little bit from you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. My name is Noah Rubin. I'm a junior at UPenn, studying electrical engineering and business in Wharton in the M&T program here. And I think for me, it's really a sense of responsibility to stand up for our people. I, like Michelle, was involved with Jewish leadership long before October 7th, leading the Penn Israel Public Affairs Committee here to do activism and do events and things around what is Israel actually and what is Zionism. But really this year, starting with some of the events at the beginning of the school year that we can talk about. Also, there were some events bubbling up under the surface even last school year. And then post October 7th, things have gotten really crazy here. I see it as a responsibility to first and foremost make sure that Jews are safe on our campus. So many of my conversations with administration, and a big focus of my testimony in Congress was about Jewish student safety, asking for the most basic things of the university that they continue to fail on, such as security for Jewish institutions that's reliable. Some Jewish institutions have not even been offered a police officer for Shabbat meals. That's completely unacceptable and should never happen, especially in a climate where we know that Jews are being targeted in their places of worship and not just at Penn, but across the country. And these are things that I've been not only me, but countless other leaders and students on campus have been asking for and have not been getting. As for the student experience, we've been met with riots and protests that go right through our campus when we're trying to study for finals, when we're trying to be in class. People have been harassed on the main street of our campus for wearing a kippah, for holding an Israeli flag, been pointed at and shouted at. Go back to Brooklyn, Berlin, effing whatever. And then you have professors in the background who are clapping and supporting all of this. Some of the chants that I have written down that I wanted to share just to frame the conversation that at Penn and at colleges across the country, we're not dealing with protesters who want to have a real conversation about geopolitics. We're dealing with completely anti-Semitic and radicalized individuals, many of whom are not part of the Penn community. They're not students, they're not faculty, but they come from the outside Philadelphia community onto our campus. And then they radicalize our student body and they radicalize our professors. They chant things not only like there's only one solution, Intifada revolution, but also in Arabic, the gate of Al-Aqsa is made of iron and only the martyr can open it. By our soul and our blood, we will redeem you, O Al-Aqsa. Everybody's maybe heard on the news from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. We've obviously heard that here, but we actually get an Arabic version too, which is from water to water, Arab Palestine. And then sometimes they do us a favor and shorten it to just Arab Palestine, Arab Palestine, Arab Palestine. To the point where Jewish students many times don't feel comfortable going to class. Myself and many other Jewish students change the way that we go to class because of these protests. We don't study at the library. Our buildings are graffitied. We had somebody say, we don't want no ceasefire, we want all of it. And so I think it's really important to frame the conversation about this is a rise in extremism and Jew hatred, and it's rampant. It's all the time. It's every single day. It's every single week. We have a new case of something that might have seemed absurd if you put it in the context of what a college campus was 15, 20 years ago, especially a school like UPenn, especially the school that I applied to. just 4 years ago. And now it's just not even surprising. I'm not even surprised by these things anymore.
Let me ask a follow-up question, and then I'd like to hear the opinions and the thoughts of the faculty members. This is a question to both of you, Michelle and Noah. So you're both mentioning that some of the professors are kind of cheering in the background or in a way supporting or not condemning what is happening. Has it been you or fellow students in both campuses? What do you do when one of your professors you have to go to class is somebody who is clearly anti-Semite? How do what do you do in this type of situation?
I think there's really nothing to do. And I think I mean, obviously you would want to say that you can go to the provost, you could speak to the faculty, you could speak to the administration, you can maybe speak to the department chair, but we know that those systems just come back to hurt the wrong people. And so, I mean, I have the chair of my department signed a statement, Faculty for Justice in Palestine, and in it was essentially saying that Israel has never to exist and that the Zionist entity is responsible for racism. Like, it was really, really intense. And I'm the major rep, which doesn't really mean much. It means I do little info sessions and celebrate our seniors when we finish our theses. And I have to go plan these meetings surrounded by people who I know hate me at my core or hate parts of the core of myself. And there's really no way I think you're supposed to handle that. So I will say before October 7th, even there's been a few professors who I've blacklisted. I've told other Jewish students just don't take their classes, but that's also not sustainable. I don't know what it's like at Penn. It's definitely bigger than Bryn Mawr, where if, unless you're taking, say, general chemistry, one professor teaches everything, right? Except for some of the basic big classes. So if you wanted to specialize in American politics, I'm really lucky that the American political professor at Bryn Mawr, Marissa Golden, absolute amazing human being, has saved me so many times. I'm really lucky that where I ended up specializing, the only professor who does that is an amazing support to me. But it could have gone the other way, and I could have been forced to not take classes that interest me because of anti-Semitism. I mean, I've been in that position. There was a few classes I wanted to take, and I just knew I could not sit in a room with that professor. And I think that's absolutely terrifying and also disgusting that we're sitting here at academic institutions. We came here to learn. I've really grown a lot as a leader, as a Jewish student. That was not my goal of college. My goal was not to come in and become really good friends with the college president because I email her every other day. Guess what happened today? I need you to address this, right? That wasn't my goal. My goal was to learn, and I haven't been able to learn. Other Jewish students have had that experience too, where you just go to class, you put your head down, you maybe do the New York Times mini crossword puzzle just to get through that hour and a half, which is not education. But as of yet, we haven't found a way to handle it because, again, it's so constant. And again, those professors also are usually encouraging types of conversations in their classrooms that are also harmful, right? So even if the professor decides that day to actually focus on curriculum or to not go into a tricky situation, they build an environment, right? At the end of the day, especially at a place like Bryn Mawr, the biggest class I ever took at Bryn Mawr was maybe 40 students, and my typical class is about 12. Some of them have 4. Right. It's very easy they very much create a culture within their classroom that will often then embolden the other anti-Semites, to be honest. So not a great answer, but Noah, what do you think?
Gary, Noah.
Yeah, I think it's a very similar situation at UPenn. There's a lot of cases where students can't take the courses that they want to take. They can't get the minors that they want to get because simply those professors have a history of anti-Semitism. I want to focus on um, 2 points though from the faculty perspective. The first for Penn is that you have many professors who blatantly violate the rules and standards in a way that freedom of speech should not even be part of the conversation. The first instance of that was the founding of Penn Faculty for Justice in Palestine, where they actually had, I don't know the exact number, I'm sorry, you can look it up online. I think it's about 70 professors who are part of this group, blocked the entrance to one of the main school buildings during the school day with a die-in, literally blocking the entrance. And that's what they claim to have been doing. That's their purpose, was to block the entrance to do that. I don't know how that's acceptable. Also intimidating Jewish students at the same time. You have another case where a professor is quoted in the newspaper saying that they skipped 2 of their own classes to go to this protest, and at the protest they are leading chants calling for an intifada. So you have a professor who skipped their own class. Instead of teaching, they are intimidating Jewish students. And then, so that's the first piece about the professors. And the second piece that's become common now is a double standard of championing freedom of expression when the freedom of expression happens to be anti-Semitism. Was just announced that Dwayne Booth, who is the now infamous cartoonist lecturer here, who shares completely anti-Semitic blood libelous cartoons online, including politicians drinking from uh, glasses of blood, um, pictures of Israeli politicians dressed up as butchers with blood dripping on their face and everything. He was renewed for the next semester. Um, he's not tenured. He teaches one class, I think. This is someone who so many Jewish students, when I showed them the cartoons for the first time, they could not believe. They thought I was like making it up, that he's actually a professor here and he's teaching another semester. And this is in contrast to the documents that just got leaked about Amy Wax, who's a professor here, who has been hit with recommended sanctions for unprofessional conduct. Um, and I think from my perspective, right, this is one of the cartoons, there's many of them. Um, Professors need to be held accountable. If you're a professor and you have Jewish students don't feel comfortable taking your classes because you're posting blood libel online, there's no reason why you should be a professor um, at the University of Pennsylvania. Um, it's actually completely outrageous. I was searching for classes and I came across that he was teaching again, and it's unbelievable. So that's why I'd say that this is like Groundhog's Day here, because it's every week we have a new thing, unfortunately. And we need to address the root causes of it, and we need to call it out when we see it.
Very powerful, Michelle and Noah. I wanted to talk to or ask Sigal, Professor Sigal Ben Porath, to jump in, but I'll just tell you that as you guys are speaking, you know, I was raised by my mother and my grandmother, who's an Auschwitz survivor from Hungary, and she was always telling me stories. And she told me about when she was 13 and 14 years old, stories that I'm telling you the truth. It's like what you're telling me now is like, wow, it's like you know, going back in time to 10, 20, 30 years ago and hearing all these stories of my grandmother from Hungary just before she was sent to the death camps and lost all of her family, etc. So, Sigal, I'm going to ask you a tough question. The question is this. You're hearing all these things, but you're also a world-renowned professor about freedom of speech. How do you reconcile, you know, this is like, it's a huge challenge. How do you reconciliate between this freedom of speech on one hand and what our students, we don't have to go and, you know, summarize just what the students just told us.
Thank you, Yair, and thank you, Noah and Michelle, for sharing all of this really difficult information, much of which, of course, I'm familiar with because it's part of my work. I work on campus free speech and open expression, as well as on campus inclusion. I am committed to both of these values, and I'm also the faculty director of Penn's Dialogue program, where we do a lot of work to try and address some of these concerns. For me, there are aspects here that are not difficult. You know, if we are seeing harassment, if we are seeing threats, or if we are seeing similar illegal aspects of behavior and conduct, then these are already either against the law in the United States or or against the rules at our university and most others. I think what's really important to keep in mind, and Yair, in fact, I want to accept that what you are saying and about your own personal experience growing up and what the students are saying about their current experiences, of course, it's true. Um, I take it as at face value. Obviously, it's true. but at the same time, there are other things that are true. For example, the sense of unsafety that we are experiencing is not in most cases paralleled with a reality of not being safe, right? So of course we need to feel safe, and especially, and I'm responding to some of the comments about social interactions, we need to feel included, and we need to be included as Jews, particularly Jewish students on our campuses. Um, uh, but I think both the efforts by, different levels of efforts by the administration at different colleges reflects a commitment to both protecting students' inclusion and belonging. I think Bryn Mawr, in fact, is not doing enough in this regards in terms of the efforts by both faculty and the administration. And it's true in some other campuses as well. But for the most part, campuses have not experienced significant reduction or notable reduction in safety. We have seen a notable reduction in a sense of safety, and we have to address that as a campus. We have to remember, okay, so I don't want to give a whole lecture, but I just want to offer a couple of points. First of all, we have to remember the legal guidance that universities have and the kind of regulations that they are bounded by, right? We have to abide as campuses by the First Amendment and other legal rules. And that means that we cannot say that protests are not allowed, or that certain protests are not allowed, or that speech, including, in my view, regretfully, but that's still the legal reality, hate speech, which is protected in the United States by the First Amendment, and therefore it's not rules that we can create that if you say something hateful, particularly in public, you can be fired, for example, or this kind of speech can be restricted. So, we have to remember the kind of context in which universities operate. But we have to also keep in mind that in order to demand that people of minority religion, like ourselves, and like people of all different types of minority identities and experiences and backgrounds and characteristics, have to make sure that they belong on campus. And so we have to push for our leadership, and I include myself in this category, for our leadership to improve the opportunities that we offer to students to have a sense of safety on campus and to know that we belong. This is, as both students have expressed, a long-term concern that has now been amplified, right? We've long had, as both students voiced now, we've long had concerns circulating among students. Oh, this professor might be, speaking in ways that are not welcoming or sharing things that are not appropriate. And so we have to address that. And I do think that we have to bring it to the leadership and to try to pressure for change in these regards. We do have to demand that the enforcement of rules such as time, place, and manner that Noah was referring to is equally and fairly addressing all different kinds of hatred and bigotry. And honestly, just because most of the people on the call are community members and maybe parents, I think that when we see places that are not doing enough, when we see colleges that are not doing enough, it is important for us to pressure them to demand different, and maybe not to send our children to places where we see that there is no response and no no commitment to making sure that Jews know that they belong. But I think mobilizing and connecting with other groups that are willing to support us, with allies, and organizing amongst ourselves is a really key to most of the response that we can offer. Um, legal legal changes of the type that is sometimes suggested is a very complicated to address. And I see Daphne asking about the First Amendment. No, universities in Pennsylvania, in some states, yes, in California, for example, but private universities uh, in Pennsylvania do not have to abide by the First Amendment, but I think it's a road that is very, very concerning for us to go down, especially as members of minority groups, because of once you start restricting speech that is unpopular, well, guess who's very often unpopular and whose views, for example, Zionist views that I share with at least some people on the call are unpopular. I really worry that once we give up on the First Amendment, we give up on some of our rights to speech as well. So I would like for us to mobilize and demand change without creating these legal, these legal boundaries that can come back and bite us. Okay, I'll stop here. I have a lot of other thoughts, but I'm happy to share the microphone with the other speakers.
So interesting and complicated. Karen is going to introduce Professor Barak, but Dudi wanted to make a comment based on what was said before. So Dudi, please jump right in.
It's not really a comment. I have many things to say. I just don't want to say everything in one batch. So something about what Michelle and Noas told us that, again, I'm taking in face value. I want to ask them, before I continue, whether you think about the university as a whole, or can we think about professor mostly in humanities, for example? Or is it you feel this across the board? Because I'm, for example, must say that my experience, I'm a professor at economics, and I think I'm very, very supportive. All my colleagues, I never had any issue with saying that I'm Jewish, that I'm Israeli, and it may be also students even, and I never, by the way, I never bring politics to campus. That's not even an issue. And I remember that even a couple of days after October 7, I have students in class. There are also people from Egypt and from Jordan, and they send me emails of, supportive about what happened. And I wonder if it may be that it's mostly depending, also related that I'm in econ, or maybe more in exact science, and what we see is mostly in the humanities. So that's maybe my first comment that I wanted to ask Michelle and Noah before I move on. I should say one last thing before. No, Michelle, answer. I see.
Okay,
Do you
I'm
want
just
to
gonna
answer?
say
And
that.
then I'll continue.
I mean, I'm someone who's like afraid of science. It's never been my strong suit, but so I spend a lot of time in the humanities.
We need to
That's
work on
where
this,
I
but
have-
that's a different issue.
Yeah, that's where I have a lot of the experience. But at the same time, Bryn Mawr and Haverford are small campuses connected. Like there was a math professor at Haverford who has said, Barak probably knows better than me, but he has said some really crazy things to the point where like I have a friend who's getting an accelerated degree, her master's and bachelor's in 4 years in math, and she's like avoiding having to take classes with him while she's like, achieving incredible things for an undergrad. So I think it's not just the humanities, at least at the BICO.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not so sure. I think at Penn, the majority of the professors that are involved in the anti-Semitism are in the college. But honestly, we're uncovering, like I said, we're uncovering things every single day and every single week. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's more of a similar situation to what Michelle is talking about. I want to very quickly comment on what Professor Ben Porath said about the feeling of safety and actually how it relates to the professors as well. I have a friend who spoke with me in the Congress. His name is Shabbos Kestenbaum, And he was actually challenged to a debate by one of the professors at his school, challenged to a debate. I say debate in quotes because later the professor posted a picture of Shabbos's head with a knife on his social media, and Shabbos had to stay in his room with armed security outside for 3 days, at the guidance of uh, personal security that he spoke with. And I bring that up because at Penn, this professor, Dwayne Booth, um, is teaching here again. And I had a meeting with the vice provost for faculty about a month and a half ago, and I said all of these things like, Jewish students don't feel comfortable taking his class. This is outrageous. Um, you put out a statement that didn't even mention his name, didn't even say what was going to happen with him, and now it turns out that he's being renewed. And I asked the vice provost for faculty, at a bare minimum, can you promise me that you reached out to the students in Dwayne Booth's classes and said to them, if you need an extended drop period because you don't feel comfortable now and you need help switching your class to something else that is going to count for your degree, or if you need support because you don't feel comfortable in this class but you needed to graduate, can you please promise me that you at least reached out to those students? She has not responded to that request. And going back to the feeling of physical safety, I've had countless meetings with um, the Department of Public Safety. We had an individual who's not a Penn affiliated person be arrested on campus for physically harassing somebody, a student. And I said to them very simply, can we ban this person from campus? Can we make sure they don't come back? No, we cannot ban the person from campus. We cannot make sure that they don't come back, even though they have a history of assaulting Jewish students. We have a student who stole an Israeli flag off of a house, and then later went to a protest that same day and said that October 7th was glorious. And they've actually been charged with a misdemeanor recently. No word from the school on how this is being addressed. That person is still in class and still walking around on campus. And so I think that I got a little bit off of the faculty being in which school they might be focused in, but I always go back to we're dealing with a culture of extremism on our campus that is being really emboldened by outside extremists from the Philadelphia area and from a lack of action from our administration and a lack of support to Jewish students.
This is very, scary, but I'm glad that we're hearing all of this. So thank you for all your comments, all of you. I wanted to talk to Professor Barak Mendelson, and I've met him a couple weeks ago in one of the protests, but I've heard a lot about him, unfortunately. So Barak, why don't you, you're a professor, you study a lot of different things, you publish a lot, you're author of books about, jihad, terrorism, and you're a professor at Bryn Mawr, and you have had a lot of difficult encounters and situations. Please share with us what has been going on, as much as you feel comfortable to say, to share with us.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to see and meet all of you. It's very unfortunate that this is under these circumstances. I think I want to speak a little bit to the different nature, I think a different dynamics that work in small liberal arts colleges as opposed to the larger schools. Because when you speak, for example, about faculty, and if you have a bunch of faculty at Penn that express anti-Semitic positions, you have better chances of managing to stay the academic course that you wanted, even though you have some of these. Not to say that we should be just accepting it, that there are such professors. But when you have a professor like that, like a math professor in my school, in Hartford College, there is very little that you can do to avoid that kind of person. You might have to go and try to use our partners at Bryn Mawr College but the meaning of faculty that are expressing anti-Semitic positions, I think, is more problematic for small schools where we have less ways to deal with that. I feel a bit uncomfortable with this in this form because I come from a very different position. I was always very happy to remove myself from any kind of identity that was not my academic identity. There is something about leaving your home country when you're an adult for many years, and at some point you no longer really belong the same way to the place that you left, but you are never really exactly belonging in your new place. So I'm an American Israeli, but I always felt a lot more comfortable with my position, my identity as a scholar. And I study security studies. I study jihadi groups, especially groups like Al Qaeda and the Islamic State. But I also wrote a lot about the relationship between Hamas and jihadi actors, and in general about homeland state actors versus states. So after 9/11, it was so obvious to me that regardless of my personal feelings, that I'm continuing to do the work that I always did, which is to try to give an analysis, geostrategic and political analysis to the best of my ability and be very critical, only to find out that apparently I was living in a la la land thinking that I really established my position as a scholar. I think that probably I was right about my the group of scholars that work on terrorism studies, but apparently not in my home institution and not in the institutions that are close to us, especially Bryn Mawr College, because while I was planning a teaching at Haverford, October 7th was Saturday, I planned for Wednesday. And the only thing that I had in mind was, well, two things. Can I emotionally do that? And second was, do I have enough information to be ready to stand in front of people and speak in a smart way about what's going on, about potentialities? And I was so shocked when I found out that, first the dean of the college tried to dissuade me. Suddenly, I needed somebody to stay with me to give additional positions because, maybe I guess I cannot be trusted because, and I went ballistic on that dean of the college. I asked him, did you even check my resume, what I'm doing, what's my record, what are my positions? And somebody that's been around for over a year at Haverford starting to apologize that he didn't have the chance because he's new in the college. Well, do your job. Complaining, he tried to suggest in the Haverford, again, liberal arts colleges also have a much more passive-aggressive discourse, and it happens especially in the Quaker ones. And so all these suggestions that are put in really nice ways, this is the same dean of the college that tried to dissuade the student from organizing, from holding an anti-Semitism awareness event on campus, and later just lied, with straight face that they did not put any pressure on that student, that the decision was made by the student. I mean, these people are not afraid of putting any lies, but I digress. But the point was that I was going to do a teaching that was supposed to provide information, and that was supposed to be, as I do, critical of everyone, because I saw myself still as a scholar. And then I understood that, I guess, that for many people, I was never really a scholar. I was always that Jew from Israel, not even as an American. They don't even see me as an American that should have rights as an American citizen. It always falls back on the fact that I'm a Jew that came from Israel, not somebody that established itself in that place. Haverford was nothing compared to what I faced 2 weeks later when I went to give a talk at Swarthmore. And in Swarthmore, sibling institution to us, I was invited during the summer they have a professor, Saida Chan. I'm sorry that I have to even suggest that to say where he came from. He's a Palestinian in his origins. That shouldn't matter at all to any of us. We should be scholars. But the point is that he's somebody at Swarthmore that been teaching about the Israel-Palestinian conflict. I gave 3 talks in his class in the past on Israeli security policy. And this summer, after he came back from 3 years at Emory to Swarthmore, he invited me to give a talk about Israeli security policy. And then the talk was scheduled to October 26th. So after I was done with the teaching at Haverford, that I did despite all those efforts to dissuade me, Swarthmore was even less pleasant. In Swarthmore, 2 hours before I come to give the talk, I got an email from side saying that there is a demonstration planned against me. I mean, what did I do? I left Israel in 2000 to pursue my PhD in the US. So I'm asked to come to a little bit earlier so that I can speak with the head of security. Speak with the head of security, and they are trying, both Said and him, to convince me to just allow the student to make their small demonstration and then go on with my talk. The plan was that I will be presented, and then supposedly a student from the demonstrator is going to read a statement, and they will walk out. And I said, sure, because freedom of speech is important, and because I understood the difficulties that my colleagues at Swarthmore do have. But of course, and the head of security said that he's going to sit in the first row so that nobody is going to try as they walk up to go and assault me. And I was still in a very different mindset. I mean, I still didn't really understand how I'm being seen. This all seemed so weird to me. I've been giving talks throughout the country. I've established myself as a scholar of terrorism. And suddenly this is all happening. This was just so strange. But somebody is coming and reading a long statement in which I'm accused of everything, including the murder of a 6-year-old Muslim boy in Chicago. I mean, kind of things that are just completely detached from any kind of reality. Even complaining that I started my talk with October 7 rather than 1948, which was especially ridiculous because they made that determination before I started my talk that starts in 48. They left the room, but they were unhappy that not enough people were left with them. So after 30 minutes, they're coming back with friends. And now there is a much bigger group shouting outside of the hall where I'm trying to speak. Again, this is a talk that was scheduled a long time ago. I continue to speak. When I finished, lots of people came to say hi and to ask questions, but I see that my host and that the head of security is trying to tell me that time that we head out. We were supposed to go to the Swarthmore Inn for dinner. So I thought that was part of it. Sai just wants to eat. Just to understand, as we're getting to leave the hall, that actually they have a security card ready for me and somebody there ready to just take me out because the demonstrators are planning on chasing me. I mean, how come, why? I had no clue. But I was not going to run away from anybody, but the whole situation, I was just completely dumbfounded where it came from. That suddenly I'm being in a position where the place that's supposed to be a sister institution, I cannot even go and give a talk. And I'm not going to any kind of talk dropped in an Israeli flag. I do my job as a scholar. And so when I ended up within that security card, 60 demonstrators were on top of me. One of them really, just in my face. I did not expect any of that. And then I started seeing and getting responses from what happens with the students. Because usually we don't really know enough about what's going on with our students. Our students don't tell us. And many times the anti-Semitism that we see these days is harder to pin down. It's not as easily as Jews go home. And so many times we don't really, as faculty, get a good sense of what is the story, what is actually going on. But I was lucky that I got some information from some students. And I was so disturbed. Suddenly, this was much bigger. And I decided that, if people are mocking me as Jewish, I'm embracing my Jewish identity. I'm in a very good crowd. I'm very proud of my people. My problem was that I never thought that I would need to justify Zionism. My definition of Zionism was always very basic, just accepting the fact that Jews, like any other people, have the right to self-determination. I did not think that I need to be pro-Zionist because it seems to me that we were supposed to be at a point that should have been obvious, the same way that I'm in support of other people's right for self-determination. And suddenly I'm now at the forefront of a struggle that I at least at Halford, that I never really thought I'm going to be involved in. And I embrace that, but I'm also extremely hurt. And to see that, especially the pain is to see that we have students that we cannot do much for them. We organize faculty at Harvard and some of the faculty at Bryn Mawr. I gotta say, Michelle is studying in a school environment that is way worse than Harvard even. And Harvard is pretty bad. Yeah. We are working in an environment where the administration is refusing to accept that there is a problem of anti-Semitism. More than that, an administration that seems to refuse to accept that Jews can be a minority, an administration that is advancing a DEI program, and I refuse to accept that DEI has to be involved with anti-Semitism. I refuse to accept that we cannot increase diversity without going to that kind of anti-Semitism. And to see anti-Semitism tropes coming even from DEI officers in different colleges. So who will defend us when nobody is willing to recognize even that Jews are a minority, let alone actually recognize that we have a systemic problem that we are facing? And we are struggling also because we cannot get media attention, because the problem that we are seeing is across the board. We are not unique at all, meaning any small institution like us, as well as in any big institution like Penn, you will find that. So we cannot really get the media attention that we need to put pressure. And I'm not sure what we can really do, because it doesn't seem that there is that the pressure from alumni and parents make any difference. And it's really hard to avoid the sense that maybe administrations feel that they are fine with having fewer Jews in these kind of schools, that we are sort of causing a trouble. We are not fitting well with their racial theories. They want to see us only as white oppressors. And with that, and they act upon that, even if, we all know how much more complex and how much more diverse we are as a community. And just to give you the sense of the alarm that we woke up in our small colleges to the point that we organize in a place like Harvard, faculty and staff to support our Jewish students. From academic institutions, faculty and staff rarely mingle. The fact that we Jewish staff or Jewish faculty at all organized was a big thing. and we are covering all aspects of our political positions, I mean, within the Zionist camp, from the most left, which is me, to the religious leaders of the community, the rabbis of Hillel and Chabad. This is a problem that we all see and share, but we feel so helpless these days. It's just really discouraging. And I guess I will stop with that.
Barak, let me introduce, because Professor Sigal has to drop off a little bit early, but Karen, why don't you, I know that you had a question, or either yours or from the crowd. So go ahead, Karen, please.
Thank you. Sigal, there's a couple questions that I'm going to try to frame into one for you, more or less, though it's not that easy to do that. But it all revolves around the free speech. So let's just do it as a two-prong. So do you Penn is a private institution. So one of the questions revolves around, if it's a private institution, the rules are slightly different for free speech. So couldn't they take a stronger stance if they want, as they have on other issues? And then the other point, which sort of totally ties into that, is at UPenn, do you personally feel, or professors at Penn could probably add in, or the students, that the issue of free speech is being treated equally for Jews and, let's just say, pro-Palestinian side or other groups?
Great, thank you so much. And I will, first of all, I'll address the general thing. Yes, private institutions have more opportunity to act, and they can, in fact, enforce more restriction on speech. We have seen, for example, at Brandeis, another wonderful private institution, they have banned some of the student groups, such as Students for Justice in Palestine and others who were, overstepping their boundaries. But we do see that the effectiveness of these measures oftentimes is very limited, because the students turn around and they reorganize as a different group. Or if you have speech codes, like you cannot say, I don't know what, you cannot say from the river to the sea. So as even Noah exemplified before, illustrated, they just find a different way of saying the same thing. So we find that these are not effective actions for the most part, although again, like on the margins, I'm not opposed. Like if you can find an effective way as a private institution to make sure that in a content neutral way, which the courts required, right? So you cannot say, for example, Zionism is allowed or not, and pro-Palestinian sentiment is allowed or not. You cannot base it on content. But you can say hatred is not allowed in particular ways and try to enforce it. I'm not optimistic, from my research and experience. I don't think this is necessarily the best way to go. I do think we need to ensure effective and equitable enforcement. I think, I don't want to adjudicate like every step that Penn is taking. So I don't know if I can, it's a complex question to ask, but I do think that there is a genuine effort at Penn and many other places to try and enforce our rules in a fair and equitable way. But I do want to address one other question too in regards to the open expression matter. Look, the First Amendment is the outside boundaries. Universities, in fact, operate more within the bounds of academic freedom. We actually violate we violate the First Amendment every day. For example, you should be allowed to give the wrong answer, on your exam. Is protected by the First Amendment, but we're still docking your grade, right? Because we are here to judge the quality of speech. The goal at universities is to focus on professional, high quality, true speech, right? And so we have a much more capacity to decide that the Flat Earth Society is not going to come speak at our astronomy conference, because this is not high quality, true professional speech. So we do make our own rules within the bounds of the First Amendment guidance and other case law. In fact, so this was a general legal comment. My own approach to open expression insists on an effort to really meld our commitment to inclusion and to open expression, which would mean that we are not only maintaining a fair and open space for free inquiry, but also that we are ensuring that everyone, including Michelle and Noah, including Barak, including everyone else, can in fact voice their perspective and be heard. If we are silencing people, even if we're not doing it through censorship or punishment in other ways, but we are just making sure that they don't feel comfortable to speak in all of these ways that we heard from these three people, then we are actually not doing our job, right? We are actually not protecting open inquiry and open expression in a robust way, because what's important for a university is not just what happens on the boundaries, it's really what happens within the boundaries. Can we express our views? Can we listen to each other? Can we create dialogue exactly in the way that Barak was describing that he's been trying to do with his colleague at Swarthmore? So my sense is that the effort has to be focused on policing the boundaries for sure. For example, if a professor is actively being exclusive, excluding or denigrating Jewish students or other students by their identity, obviously we have to respond to it as a college. And I'm saying obviously, even though clearly not everyone is doing that, trying to do it or doing it effectively. But we also have to make sure that we build coalitions and we try to create dialogue, and that we really not just amplify and engage with hatred. Sometimes we have no choice and we have to engage with hateful expression, like happened to Barak at Swarthmore. But we also have to make sure that we circulate and amplify and engage with relevant, important, including diverging perspectives, and that we look for ways to create the kind of space that we want to live in, right? One of my children went to Vassar College, which is a very similar, also small, also liberal arts, and they definitely had SJP, and that's before this year. Had SJP, they had protests, they had Israel Apartheid Week, which regretfully is coming up this coming week, and oftentimes amplifies hatred towards Israel and sometimes towards Jews. But they also had Chabad, and they had the Jewish house, and they had learning groups, and they had very rich and satisfying Jewish life there. And this is what we need to uplift and to counter some of the perspectives, the hateful and untrue perspectives about Israel and about Jews. We have to amplify the correct and the more appropriate voices that stand against those. So, this is a little bit Pollyannish, I recognize. I want to say I do see these problems that people here are voicing, but I just want to encourage everyone to act in solidarity and in ways that amplify dialogue. And in this spirit, if you are in the mainline area, there's going to be a rally this afternoon at 4:30 at Narberth, supporting a Jewish business owner whose store was vandalized on Friday with graffiti against Israel. So we have to try and stand up for each other, but especially to offer, as many of you have been doing, alternatives to how we think about dialogue. And I just want to respond to Kim briefly. It's not theoretical. This is my everyday work. I'm happy to share with you, Kim, or with others who are interested. This is the work I've been engaged in for 10 years on many college campuses, including Penn, and it's definitely something that is practical and possible. I'm offering it at the high level of abstraction. but I think it's work that can and should be done.
So Sigal, thank you for that. I have a few follow-up questions. I know you have to go, but we'll try our best to get them to you quickly. So the first one is the case with Professor Amy Wax, if you're familiar with it at all,
Well,
why
I'm not
would
just
that not be
familiar.
open
In
expression?
fact, so I actually wrote this report that is referenced in the, I'm one of the people who were on the committee. This is confidential, but it was leaked to the press. So I can say that, I'm involved in this case and therefore I cannot comment on it here.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. I appreciate that. And then there was the person who asked the question about free speech standards. The question, they wish to clarify that what they are really asking is, are free speech standards applied equally when the subject is Jews/Israel versus other minority groups? Or do you feel that it is?
So what I was trying to say is that I think in most instances, including at Penn, there is clearly an effort and a commitment to applying the rules in an equitable way. I think people sometimes observe a sense of difference, and Noah was referring to some of these, but my understanding from really looking at a lot of the data in this regard, both from the student conduct office that we have and from other instances in the past 15 years or so, it seems to me in regards to Penn and a few other colleges that I've looked at, that there is an effort to apply the rules equitably, or there is an equitable understanding of what it means to address hatred or to address other instances of people crossing lines. So I cannot say that is the case in every single college. I haven't looked at all of them, but where I have looked, I know that we sometimes feel like we're not being treated equally, and I'm sure in some instances it's true, but for the most part, processes of responding to hatred and bigotry are, like everything at the university, they are bureaucratic efforts that take a long time. Again, if you look at the Amy Wax case, it's been years and years before the report came out, and the report hasn't come out yet. It was just leaked, but the case isn't even resolved yet. So these are not things that you say, this was hateful, you're out. It's not the same process as in any private business about any person who acted inappropriately.
Sigal, I know that you need to leave, but and we're already above time, but we're gonna push it for until 12:30. And again, if you need to leave, anybody, it's all recorded. I'd like to, I want to say that what Barak told me that shook me is his frustration or his like not really knowing what to do. For example, he was talking about the media, and the media doesn't pay attention anymore because it's happening so much and everywhere. So it's not any more interesting. There's nothing unique about it because it's so prevalent. And I also was concerned about, his question, who will defend us? Who will defend the Jews in campuses and in Bryn Mawr and all these places, small colleges and big universities? And the question I'm going to ask first, Dudi, because you have not been personally experiencing anti-Semitism directed at you, but you've been taking this almost as a mission, and you're going and exploring Princeton and Penn and Columbia, different universities, talking to provosts and stuff. So tell us about your experience. Who will defend us? Do you think the leaders that you have been interacting with throughout the country, especially, the East Coast, will defend us? What is your answer to Barak?
So first of all, I think there is indeed this harmony in terms of experience, and I think it's fine. It's okay. It's not. Some people feel different, have different experience about the situation, and I think it's okay. I would like to say a little, maybe I will not be able to answer your question, Yair, but just to give a little background. So most of my experience is as a Penn Fellow, which is a leadership program that I participate in this year. And I meet many, I would say, influential people at Penn, including the Vice Provost, the Dean, including the Dean of Annenberg, chairs in other groups. And I think what I am mostly disappointed from is that I think the university in general is unclear, and it was always unclear, if you ask me, about what does inclusion mean? What is diversity? What does it mean? And particularly after October 7. I mean, what does it mean to feel safe? And what is a normal tension between to be surrounded with people who have different opinions than you and feeling insecure? Because also, you know, even coming back from Israel and being in the army, you are around people, and even in the academia in Israel, you are around people who are very, very left-wing. On the other hand, people who are very, very right-wing, very different opinions, and you somehow, on the one, live with them. Another question that I think may be related to Amy Wack's issue, but this is at least what the dean of Annenberg told me, that this person with cartoons, he didn't bring it to class. He didn't basically sell to people directly, to students in the class about this. It's something that he did in his own, on his own webpage, which is, again, she doesn't like, but isn't different than bringing to the class and saying to a student, you because you are a Jew, that's what will happen. So I'm a little disappointed about the way they think about inclusion. I also very skeptical if you take the word Jew and replace it with Black, the reaction will be the same. I think there is a lot of asymmetry here, something the university leaders just don't like to admit. That's my feeling. I think what we need to do, and what I will keep doing for sure, is to keep push and make it clear that all the standards that we are having will be including also Jewish. So whatever you say, whatever is a big no to say on Blacks, it will be the same thing on Jewish people. I think, but again, I think all of this is it's a process. We are. It's very difficult after, we are only a couple of months after October 7, and all this diversity and inclusion. It's something that the university put as a big flag for many, many years. And it will be kind of a process to start to reevaluate what do we really mean by it, what do we want to achieve. Yes, so at the moment I have more questions than answers, but I think there is a lot of work to do.
I think
Thank
that,
you.
Karen, you wanted to go ahead?
Yeah, I just want to ask a couple of questions for the students. So Judy, thank you for your thoughts. Everybody, really, thank you so much for your thoughts. It's clear as a community, we have a lot of work to do. And one of the things that we'll work on in the scenes and try to get back to you on actually is, how do we support the people, the Jews, both the students and the professors who feel so beleaguered at Bryn Mawr and Haverford College? And so we are actually already trying to think of some ways to help you guys. If you have some input directly on that, please let us know. Please reach out and let us know. I'm in touch with Barak, so he can let me know. Michelle, if you want to touch base. But you know, you are not alone. You are a member of a larger tribe, and we are here to support you. And as Sigal mentioned, there is a rally today in support of Nana's Kitchen, which was defaced sometime this week. We're not actually sure when, and it's at 4:30 in Narberth at the train station. But we do not want you ever to feel that you're alone, and you are not alone. So know, as beleaguered and as horrible as it gets when people are yelling and screaming at you, that we are all with you. And I hope that helps you, because we really are all with you. So Michelle, I have a question for you. in discussion about activism on campus and issues at Bryn Mawr, et cetera, you've been there now 4 years, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah. So has any other issue of an activism level on campus ever generated so much interest from the student body?
It's a good question. There is one. This is a little bit of complex Bryn Mawr Haverford lore, so I'm going to try to simplify it. But my freshman year, so 4 years ago, there was a strike protesting anti-Black racism and oppression on our campuses. And I think it's important to realize, I mean, like a place like Bryn Mawr was literally built by Black bodies. We have tunnels underneath our campus connecting the oldest buildings so that servants and slaves could walk around campus and not be seen and yet serve the white people there. So it is very much a big issue on campus. And we had this big strike. People didn't go to class. Some classes were canceled. People stopped going to work. It was really like a very stressful time. And I think it was one of those times though where we really started to see a lot of these social intimidation dynamics start to play out. The thought was very much, if you're not with us, you're against us. So there were a lot of students who were like, well, I'm here on scholarship. If I don't go work at the dining hall, then they might kick me out of college or I might be able to pay. Does that mean I don't support? Does that mean I'm racist? No, that just means that you have a right. Like some people were like, well, most of our dining hall staff, like the full-time staff, are Black. So me not going, is that making their job harder? Right? There were all of these issues, but everyone was like really stressed. I was personally remote. I was a little bit confused. I've never been on campus and everyone's talking about things, but it was a really intense time. And I think we've very much seen that carry over. But I think that to me is a very different situation because that's directly impacting our campus. That was about the ways that Bryn Mawr and Haverford administration have not reconciled with their past or not making better policies, right? Like that was really our problem. And whether or not this was the way to respond, I can't speak to, but that was our problem. I, in my time, have not seen another issue that is not our problem in the same sense as an actual campus problem where, say, protesting the president could actually change something. Has this type of activism come up? I asked someone one day, like they have all these petitions going around where they want Bryn Mawr and Haverford to use their position as a respected Pennsylvania institution to call on John Fetterman for a ceasefire. And I finally asked someone, like this is a little bit rude, so I'm sorry, but I finally asked them, what's going to happen? President Cassie of Bryn Mawr College is going to call John Fetterman, who's going to say this is a great idea, who's going to call Joe Biden, who's somehow going to call Benjamin Netanyahu, who's going to say, no way. Now that the students at Bryn Mawr College have signed this petition, we're going to have a ceasefire, right? Like it doesn't really make sense. And that's a kind of, I shouldn't have said that, whatever I said that, like it's a little bit rude, but like it doesn't really make sense. I don't think we've seen an issue like this one. And I think something that I've been thinking about a lot when like Sigal and other people were talking, were like, I think there's a very big difference between, and it's also related to this issue of, equal treatment and things. I think it's a very big difference to have free speech and like selective community speech. So at a place like Bryn Mawr and Haverford, we have our own dictionary. I promise you, I realized I came home after one semester at Bryn Mawr and I was saying things, and even my very liberal family was like, what is this dictionary? Because we have a whole lexicon of words that people and their community have said that harms me. And we say we will no longer use it. We have changed the way we have done all these things. And that doesn't happen for Jews. I sat in a class and told someone that saying globalize the Intifada harms me. I was sitting next to a fellow Jewish student whose friend's parents died in the Intifada, and the professor tried to tell us that it was peaceful. Like, in what world, first of all, like whatever, but what world am I as a Jewish student saying this harms me and my community, this makes me feel scared for my life, and you say, no, don't worry, honey, that's not what I meant. That's not the case for other people. And that's not acceptable. Like I'm very, very passionate about this, but it's like, it's really absurd that even free speech aside, like why can't the Jewish community say, this is what we need to feel safe? And why can't we respond to this small intentional community that we've done that for every other minority group to different extents? I mean, we had a transphobic graffiti on our campus my sophomore year. It was really, really bad. Every single year, it was surrounding one of our yearly traditions. For the last 2 years, at the time of that tradition, we get an email from the college, remembering the fact that some people use this tradition as an opportunity to hate members of our community, and that is not who we are, and that's not who Bryn Mawr should be, and you should report this, and we're going to discipline you if you, spray paint transphobic words on the wall. Meanwhile, people took red paint and bloody handprints everywhere, accusing Jews and the administration of killing Palestinians, and that was okay. So I'm sorry that was a rant, but like I think it's really uneven, and I don't think we've seen the students again come up about anything not related to our campus culture that actually have control over like this. I think it's very clear what the root of their issue is, and I think it's Jews.
Michelle, this is
I'd like to
super powerful. 1 second. I'm very mindful of the time because it's almost 12:30, and I will say that this is so fascinating, and people are so encouraged, and sending us questions, and it's really amazing. And I think that we have to have a second session about this and I'm going to ask one last question, because we are not okay with Jewish hatred. We will never be okay with this. And we will never accept it. It will not be the point that in media people will just ignore because it happens so much. We will continue working with everybody on campuses, universities, faculty, students to find ways to fight this. We will, and you are not alone. And I want to ask Noah and Barak to make. I know that we've been long after time, but one last comment or anything that you want to share with us or tell us. And again, I'm hoping for another session because this is really important.
Thanks so much. I just want to start by saying what Michelle said was so relevant. And the only thing that I would add from Penn is just that we have similar experience. Last year, there were climate protesters who stormed the football field during the homecoming game. They were all arrested. And a few weeks ago, we had the first board meeting with the new president and the new board chair, and pro-Hamas. I think it's very important to call these people pro-Hamas because that's what they are. Pro-Hamas protesters came in and disrupted the meeting with bloody hands and chanting. And they sped through the board meeting. Within 5 minutes, they raised tuition by 4%. And then they ended the board meeting without getting through all the agenda items. That's directly from the news article that came out. And so nothing happened to those students that we know. They were not escorted out. Actually, they caved to them. And as UPenn, we need strong leadership. We need to know what we're good at. We're not good at football. We are supposed to be good at research and contributing to the world in other ways. And when you have a board meeting and it's the first board meeting with a new leadership and you want to discuss real issues at Penn, but also talk about maybe, I don't know, the new nanorobotics that's supposed to be coming out of Penn, the new developments of the mRNA vaccine that's supposed to be coming out of Penn, maybe some new geopolitical strategy that's supposed to be coming out of Penn. But instead, you have to end the board meeting short because you can't manage to escort people that are disrupting your meeting out. I think it's just embarrassing, honestly, and we need strong leadership from our universities now more than ever, and we're just not seeing it. That's the only thing I would add to what Michelle said, because I think it's the same story here, it's the same story there, and it's the same story at college campuses across the country.
Very powerful, and thank you, Noah. Barak, last thoughts. You're the last person.
2 points. One is that there needs to be something about the sanctifying activism for activism's sake, which seems that this is something that small liberal arts colleges are now trying to overemphasize. I'm all for activism, but activism also needs to be smart. The activism that we are seeing is primarily activism of self-absorbed students that think way too high of themselves and way too little about how political processes actually happen. And this is also a failure of the academic institutions, but it's not surprising that many times, at least in our colleges, those that are leading the calls for activism are those that are not fans of doing scholarship. And the last thing that I want to say is first, thank you that you're not leaving us alone. I mean, this is super important for us. I think this is also a way to move forward, because if there is something that the small liberal arts colleges really care for these days, and remember, a lot is performative, but that's enough that we can hit them on the things that they are doing mostly as performative aspects, is the connection to the communities. right? They don't like the idea that they would be portrayed as elitist, as not really part of the community around them. The problem is that these colleges see the community around them only in terms of the other minorities, right? So at Hartford College, when people here think about the community surrounding us, they think about the African-American community of Ardmore, or they think about the inner city of Philadelphia. They don't think about the fact that Lower Merion also has a significant number of Jewish community, and to be good neighbors in our community also means that they need to pay attention to us. And I think that external pressures from the Jewish communities on the main line can be extremely important to our struggle, because we are facing administrations that just don't care. We need to make them care, and we need to hit them exactly on the point that that they really care for. And I think that that way, the external support that we can get from the community, besides the fact that it helps us feeling that we're not alone. We organized the faculty at Hartford to speak with the students, to let them know that they're not alone. So it does help us as well to know that we're not alone, especially those of us that are vocal. Because the vocals, there are very few people that can be vocal. So that external support is extremely important for us in the many ways that the Jewish community is giving us. So I really want to thank you all for that.
Well, listen, this has been very powerful. I'm still shaking inside and outside. And I wanted to thank again all of those who joined. Sorry again for the technical issues. And thank you especially Michelle and Noah for everything that you're doing. And Barak, it's like I cannot even imagine what you've been going through. And Sigal and Dudi for joining and shared their personal experiences with us. And I can tell you that Karen and myself are getting text messages that this has been really, really helpful to hear. And I do think that we're going to have a second session. And if Michelle and Noah and all of you would be interested, and we'll definitely arrange it and continue this conversation and, acting. We will never accept this. We will never accept anti-Semitism.
And Yair, I just want to add one thing, that we are planning on organizing and bringing a screening of the movie Supernova to Bryn Mawr Festival, to Bryn Mawr and Haverford College. We have a potential date out there, but we're just trying to finalize a few things. But again, bringing awareness and bringing stuff to help support your community. We are here, we are willing and able, and whatever you need, just reach out to us. Hopefully the documentary will be screened within the next month, actually, at the colleges. So
Karen,
Daphna?
yeah, can I just add one more thing? We have the Homo Dome installation that's ready to be installed at any of the colleges. I've been in touch with Cheryl about it, and if you want to do it at Haverford College, Bryn Mawr College, we did it at Penn. I think it was very successful. So please be in touch with me.
I can make the connections.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
תודה רבה, everybody, and עם ישראל חי. שבוע טוב.
שבוע טוב.
Thank you everyone for listening.
Shavuot Tov, thank you all.
שבוע טוב. תודה לכולם.